Cool. All right. We got a ton of people coming in already. So let's get started because I know we have a short amount of time. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this session of ACE Interns panel. We're super excited to share everything we know. I'll do my little spiel here and then we'll get it going. I'm excited to host this ACE Interns panel with Kakhi, Maxwell Jr. and Grant Ward about their careers. I'll ask them questions about how they got started and what they've been up to after graduating from the ACE internship program. And they'll also be sharing stories and experiences that would definitely be helpful for all of us to hear. Before we begin, I'll introduce Kakhi and Grant. Kakhi's credits include Hulu's Reasonable Doubt Season 3 and reality show Fixer Upper Castle Hotel and Lake House. Grant's credits include apprentice editing on Star Wars, The Mandalorian, and Grogu, and being a finishing editor on indie film Get Away If You Can. I'll also introduce myself as well. I'm Alfonso Carrion. I got my first start as an assistant editor working on 3 seasons of Netflix House of Cards, 3 films with director-editor Steven Soderbergh, and most recently the pilot season of Netflix's 3 Body Problem. Between the 3 of us, we should hopefully share a lot of stories and insight on what the day-to-day is working in these high-pressure cutting rooms, and more importantly, the first steps in how we got started. Lastly, we were all previous ACE interns, so we'll be chatting about the internship program as well. Kakhi was our most recent ACE intern of 2024. Grant was an ACE intern in 2023, and I was an ACE intern in 2014. So welcome, Kakhi and Grant. Thank you so much for being here. We're excited to hear your experiences so far after graduating from the ACE internship program. Lastly, I will leave 10 to 15 minutes to answer any questions in the end. But again, feel free to put it in the Q&A section, and we'll just kind of go through it after we finish our little setup here. So first off, the question that everybody probably has, how do I get started? What's the first step in becoming an editor? I'm a newcomer in this industry, someone who's been interested in making a career out of editing. Where do I begin? You know, what kind of gigs should I be looking for to get me right on the right path?
I think I can kind of
go for it, Grant.
I mean, I think the number one priority I would always say is community. That's really kind of what it's about. And I like to see it in kind of 2 different formats. I think there's one element that's really beneficial of being part of a community of people who are doing what you're doing. So specifically editorial, get to know people who are working in the fields that you're interested in. And so knowing if you want to work in features, get to know people who are working in features. If you want to work in reality, get to know people working in reality, and just be a part of those communities to get a foundational knowledge as to what that environment looks like and to just get your name out there to begin building those relationships. But then on the flip side too, I think it is important to be creating, is to be practicing, even if you're not exactly where you're at or you want to be, to still be developing the skills. And so getting to know other creatives, getting to know a community of just filmmakers as a whole, get to know directors, get to know DPs, get to know people where, get to know people who want to take advantage of your skill set, your craft that you have on offer, and start collaborating with those people, because as they go and work different projects, you may be someone they want to talk to.
Can I take that a step further? How do you get in contact with like a community or like with people that you you said you want to work in features? How do I even make that bridge?
I think there's a lot of different avenues to that. For me, what I did was I very much was a cold emailer. And so I would go onto IMDb and I would find, whether it was an editor, an AE, or even a PA, I would just find lists of people who worked on shows that I liked. And I would just do some internet sleuthing and figure out how to get their email. And I would just send them, messages to see who would kind of reply. I would get a response from maybe 10% of the people that I would reach out to, but in those 10% led to really valuable conversations and really valuable connections. Finding an environment like ACE, truly, there's so many people who have so much experience and background who want to share, want to educate and give. And so getting to find a community like this, where there's people willing to kind of share that information, it's a matter of just kind of taking a step in and saying hi and, trying to start those conversations.
How about you, Kakhi? How have you felt success in sort of becoming that, taking that first step and becoming, assistant or apprentice?
Yeah, I think the first thing, like, you definitely have to decide, like, this is what I want to do. Like, this is what I want to fully commit to as a career, profession, that, hey, I want to be an editor. And so obviously the first step into that is to be an assistant editor. And I like to think of it as like you having like 2 cars, like everybody has like You're in an indie world. In the city you're in, there's a community of filmmakers there that are making short films, that are shooting spec commercials, that are sharpening their craft. And then you have like this bigger lane, where everybody, you want to work on the TV shows that you watch, you want to work on the movies that you go see. And I think that it's really important, to what Grant said, is to build a community and like have a community in both. And, as you build your craft and as you work, in both lanes, or maybe in the indie realm first, they're going to start to merge as you begin to work harder and harder and harder, because you're going to start meeting more people that know each other. And if you're just communicating to people what you want to do, those worlds will merge. So I would just encourage people to, like, first and foremost, work with the people in your city.
Yeah, I mean, even the things that ACE has a lot of different events that they're hosting, especially like EditFest, but even in-person EditFest is a great place to start meeting people. Even this networking function, take it seriously. There are a lot of more ways I think you can probably reach out to someone. I think I also kind of share the same sentiment as Grant was saying. I'm a very cold email kind of person, especially when I was starting with the internship program. I wanted to cast a wide net. I wanted to look up people on LinkedIn. I think I emailed probably 10 people per week and just kind of kept going. It felt good. You were productive. But then how many people responded? One, one person every 2 or 3 months. And it just was, it to me, it didn't feel like it was a struggle. I think it still felt like I was getting somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Just to piggyback on that, yeah, definitely did the cold emailing. I mean, you have to reach out to people that are doing what you're doing. And then obviously you don't want to send out, we can all attest to this, you don't want to send out emails that are very robotic, right?
Yes.
You want them to be personalized. You want the person to feel like you connect with them on what they're working on. And that, a lot of those, again, you're going to send out a whole bunch, but if you send out the right emails, they're going to resonate and the people will respond, and then you go from there.
Yeah, I like that. Can we just go into that a little bit? So when you send the email, it's not like hi, I'm Alfonso. I'm looking to become an assistant. Do you have time? Can I share? You got to do your research. Who are you looking up, right? Is this person an assistant, a post-BA on a show that you love? Why don't you share a specific scene that you love about the show, or share something part of the process? Like I heard you guys used script sync on this. Like, there was an improv. Was the scene improv? Like, how did you guys do that? It kind of fascinated me, and how so-and-so, right? Like, be very passionate about the email, because when I get an email like that from someone out of nowhere and I read it and they're very engaged about or wanting to know more about my work, I'm more likely to respond.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a personalization, I think, that is key. And it takes you a step away from like, hey, can you give me something, to can I get to know about you? Can we build a bridge together? That makes it so much more willing, I think, on the recipient's side to want to share and be like, oh, this person's very excited about what it is I'm doing. Like, of course, I'd be willing to kind of give that, rather than being like, oh, I can tell this person is just like looking for a job and there's no soul that's being exchanged right now.
That's right. Yeah. The passion has got to be there, and it's got to be felt immediately, so.
Right. And like, when you compliment somebody in an email, you never know like how much blood, sweat, and tears went into that one thing. And like, you could compliment a very sensitive, thing that they did in the scene. They're like, wow, somebody saw that. That's great.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Well, there's a lot in there that we can totally, chat about for a longer time, but let's keep it going. I want everyone to kind of know sort of your responsibilities currently, whether you're a post-BA, apprentice editor, assistant editor. Can you share examples of your stories or experiences of what you do on a day-to-day basis? Kind of like walk us through like a very stressful, busy morning at work. Kakhi, you can go first.
Yeah, for sure. So depends on what phase of the show we're in, but if it's, let's say the beginning of the show, definitely going to obviously communicate with my editor, how do you want things this season? How do you want the project set up? How do you like your scenes to be prepared for you? Where do you want me to put the scenes, particularly, once they're done for you? And then also, one of your biggest assets is going to be speaking to like your post supervisor. How do they like things for their admin team? What's going to make all of their lives easier? Because, you do have kind of two worlds there. You're taking care of your editor, and then you're the conduit, between the post supervisor and the admin team to the editor. And so dailies, get the dailies going for them, get those marked up. Once those are done, I give them to the editor. The editor would start to kind of watch through them, start to edit the scenes. And as they're getting, scenes done, they'll hand over the scenes for me to do sound design. And so, I'll kind of, if I can, I like to go back through the script for the specific scenes that, are handed back over to do sound design. And I'll start to kind of get my, part of the creativity out and start to do some of the sound design and kind of just prep those. And typically in the beginning of a project, that's your main thing, is the dailies. And so I would say that that's kind of the biggest focus of a big, busy morning on the front end of a project.
Awesome. Grant?
Yeah. So I right now am actually working a job where I'm kind of doing both, where I'm being both a post PA and an apprentice editor. So I got promoted to apprentice in the middle of Joe, and so I'm still retaining a lot of the duties that I was doing before. But the way I kind of view it is like, if an editorial team is a well-oiled machine, the post PA is in many ways the lubricant to that machine. It's just making things go as smoothly as possible. And so kind of the day-to-day as a post PA is very much just kind of being on call, hands and feet. And so it's, getting the lunch runs, it's, organizing the office, doing the crafty, making things feel comfortable around the office, making sure things feel clean. If there's ever a need for a run around town, you're the one to kind of go and do that. And kind of being that kind of person who has the energy, I think, too, to kind of help things feel engaged and feel positive and just kind of feel exciting. And then as an apprentice editor, I'm very much a trainee in a lot of ways. I'm learning to become an assistant editor. And so because I got promoted in the middle of our process, we already kind of had like certain workflow structures put into place. And so it's more so me kind of like watching how things are done and beginning to kind of practice and kind of get my way in. And slowly I'm kind of taking on the responsibilities of helping out with outputs or helping out with turnovers, tracking turnover documentation and exports where they're going. And it's kind of just like slowly grabbing some of the assistant or the VFX editors, responsibilities, more of the tedious stuff, and kind of helping just lighten their load so they can focus more on their things too. And the thing too is like post PAing can look very different for any production that you're on. We were a bit unique in that we had editorial be on set during production during our feature. And so I was on set every day, and I was setting up like on set editing bays and editing stations for each day of shoot. And so I'd be basically putting an Avid, a Mac, some monitors on a standing desk on wheels, and I would get that set up so that the editors and AEs could work on that during the day. And then once we would wrap for the day, I'd disassemble it, cart that desk to the next stage and set it all up for the next day. If we had a location shoot, work with transpo to get those things out. But that was very much on me too. Like, and that was a requirement that the team needed me to really kind of take care of. And again, it was smooth because when they come to arrive on set for the next day, they need to be ready to go ASAP. And so I need to be the one to kind of get that there ready for them. And so
with a lot of the types of sort of random various tasks that you're given, I assume reading the room is a pretty huge part of learning that part of your job, and making sure you're not getting in the way, or when you're needed, you're supposed to be there. How do soft skills play into our jobs, and how is it important to you as far as like making sure that everything goes smoothly?
I think for me, actually, before I went to film school, I went to school with a background in psychology. And I actually tend to apply a lot of that, I feel like, to jobs that I go to and just environments that I go in. And I think what really helps me, especially if it's like an environment that is kind of stressful, or if there's, kind of politics at play, or like you're trying to figure out how to go about navigating a relationship or dynamic. I think the one thing I do remind myself is that for as much as we want an environment to be as professional as possible, we're all still human beings, and we all still have egos as well. And so to recognize at times when, there may be sometimes conflict that arises, to know that very rarely it's ever something to do about the self. It's usually about more bigger dynamics at play, whether there's a very stressful, screening that's happening very soon, or there's a deadline coming up that people are kind of getting things around. And so when it comes to reading the room, no matter how high tensions are, no matter what the dynamics are, to enter into that room and just observe and listen with patience, with forgiveness and just a willingness to support and help, and to really just, again, remind yourself that it's not about me, it's about us. It's about this team that we're kind of going through. The answers really naturally begin, I think, to present themselves into how to, you know, take initiative in doing something that you recognize needs to get done, or to just be a person of like moral support for somebody else going through something too. I know a lot of people talk about how like the editor is like the director's therapist. You know, AEs are very much the editor's therapist, and sometimes the post PA is the AE therapist. And so it's like, but that willingness to comfort and support through all that process too. Again, I think just like it helps give you the answers of how to read, you know, in really awkward situations at play.
Absolutely.
And it comes, I think, just with that willingness to just observe and be patient and just kind of take it that step by step.
And for you, Kakhi, has there any, you know, been a situation or an experience where you read the room correctly, or if you want to share something that you didn't want to, you know, you didn't read the room correctly? Has there ever been something like that on your show where, you know, you're like, oh, thank God I did that?
Well, yeah, I think that, you know, first off, I worked with a really great group of people on Reasonable Doubt, but you know, it's, you know, like whether it's, you know, somebody trying to articulate themselves and get an idea out in a room full of important people, or whether, you know, my editor, you know, it's the difference between, you know, my editor having, you know, a stressful week and, you know, very well being invited to sit in the room with the showrunner, but understanding that he's probably had a stressful week. He's probably got some big scenes that he needs to kind of sit in there and let him kind of work those out. Those are the things of like reading the room correctly and be like, oh, hey, I'm actually going to go work on these things, you know, and then I'll have other opportunities to be in the room with him with the showrunner. But it's just understanding the flow and the alchemy of how things are going on in the room. You know, being a good listener is like the number one job. They say reading the room, but like being a great listener is a part of that. Like knowing when, you know, it's probably best that you know, step out and let this conversation kind of go in a different direction so they can find a solution. And it's just really important to step back, try to be the last person to talk. If nobody, you know, really has a question for you, and then if somebody turns to you, then, you know, make that argument, or make that, you know, let your opinion be known. But just read the room and know when it's your turn to kind of make that contribution.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, being proactive in anything too is probably, and it goes hand in hand with that. So knowing what your editor's preferences are, knowing what even sometimes the director, whenever they order something for lunch, even as simple, they're like, oh, you got that last time. Do you want it? Do you want this again? They're like, well, how did you know that that was what I ordered 2 months ago? Because I wrote it down. Yeah. So it's all these, you know, small things that make you stand out.
And I think to piggyback off that too, it's so helpful if obviously the people on our team are open to it as well, to get to know each other on like a personal level too, just to get to know like what do their lives look like outside of work, because so much of the life that people live individually does come with them to the workplace that they have. And again, that can provide you a lot more patience and forgiveness of knowing like, okay, if they respond a certain way to something, knowing that that's probably coming from something else out here. So I'm going to navigate, I'm going to communicate in a certain way. I'm going to prepare myself in a certain way to have on offer what they need to their own personal needs. And that can very much come from just getting to know the person, even outside of that kind of just like structured hierarchical, you know, dynamics at play in the edit station. And that comes from just like conversations over lunch, or just, like being willing to ask like, how are you doing? You know,
lunch is so important as far as conversations go. It's because you don't talk about work, you talk about who they are and what they like. So I'm gonna skip a little bit because I want to kind of get the ACE internship program in here, and we want to chat about that experience. So what was your process like during your year, and how was the experience for you in the program? You know, how did it help to get to where you are, and what are some of the lessons you learned that you'll never forget? Let's start with you, Kakhi.
Yeah, no, this past year was just, I mean, it was career changing, personally changing, spiritually changing. I mean, it's funny that we say that we were, you know, cold emailing people, and now more than ever, we are just sending so many emails, having gone through the ACE internship. You communicate so much. But, you know, I was able to shadow some incredible teams, you know, from The Voice to, you know, Laura Zempel and her creative team on Sirens, Fred Raskin, you know, when he was on The Working Man. And so it's just learning the craft from people that really care about what they're doing. Again, going to a lot of stuff that Grant says, it's like learning the ins and outs of high, you know, very high productions, how the TV world works when I was with Laura, and seeing her with the showrunners, and then just watching them kind of get through the cut process, watching the assistants and how they kind of hand a heavy load on a Netflix show.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just taught me, that I'm in the right place, going for what I really want to do. And all those people are in my Rolodex as far as advice, craft, career navigation, just any questions that I have about doing this job. So yeah, it's just been incredible. I also went to tons of events. I went to the Eddies, which was amazing. And just, one thing that I tell people going to the Eddies is that when I was there and I was seeing all the nominees, and we know all of the, bigger, I don't say bigger editors, just all of the more mainstream shows, you sit there and you see all these nominees of all these hardworking people that are in the nominees, and you're just like, wow, all these people that I don't know their names, I don't know, but like they're working on this amazing stuff. And so that was really inspiring for me to just know that there's way more people behind the scenes, way more people behind the scenes editing some of the biggest stuff out there.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, the ACE internship program is just, they give you so much access to all the, events and stuff. So that was cool for you to experience that. And how about you, Grant? How was, after a year and a half of being graduated from it? I mean, you are on Mandalorian and Grogu, but how has it sort of shaped who you are as an aspiring current editor?
Yeah, I think really the number one thing that I feel so appreciative of from the internship was just the perspective that I think it gave me. Was because, I remember hearing so many stories when I was first kind of breaking my way into the industry and kind of trying to figure out what I want to do with my own career, of how easy it can be to get kind of pigeonholed into a certain path where, you can you start working in, documentary. It's very easy to kind of only ever be in documentary, and how making that shift over is really difficult. Same thing with being in TV or features. Like, it's so easy to kind of start on one track and just kind of only stay on that track. And so that's kind of where early on difference can be very impactful in terms of where your career trajectory takes you. And so getting to be an early graduate and getting to go shadow a feature film, a TV show, a reality show, even spend time getting to know people who work in documentary and really get a perspective of like, okay, what do all of these different journeys and avenues within a tour, because there's a lot of different paths you can take, but getting to have a very vivid understanding of what the day-to-day looks like on The Voice, or what the day-to-day looks like on, Rebel Moon, a very big VFX heavy feature film, or, a smaller independent movie. It's like, it's so rare to get to have that understanding at such a young age and so early in your career. And so when you inevitably go about, each project that you go to, and you begin meeting people that you're going to be working with or in your environment, and you begin getting opportunities to say yes or no to, just knowing what those different environments look like allows you to ask yourself, okay, how do I want my future to feel? What environment do I want to be putting myself into? And it gives you the tools to know what for you is what you should be saying yes to and what you should be saying no to, because you have that kind of foresight that is so rare to get this early on. I remember talking to somebody on The Voice, an AE on there who'd been working in reality for 15 years, and he was almost interviewing me, asking me like, so what was your experience like being on the feature for a week? Like, well, how did their team look like? What was the organization that like? And I'm like, you've worked in this industry for 15 years, and yet you have no idea what this looks like. And so it's like, again, like getting to just have that perspective, I found to be just the most invaluable experience. And it's something that I take with me both on like the feature I'm working on now, but then also when I ask myself, okay, where do I want to go to next? So much of the considerations I take comes from the experience that I had in the shadowing that I got to do.
I think saying no was the hardest thing for me to learn, especially from starting out after the ACE internship, because I knew I needed to get my days, and I had a specific track I wanted to. I didn't want to go into a post PA gig without having my days, especially if it was like a big feature. And of course, those opportunities, fortunately they came, but I had to say no. And it was hard because it was a job. It was on a really cool show. And then you kind of just had to close your eyes and be like, nope, this is my track. This is what I'm going to do. I need to get my days. I need to go find a reality, non-union show, become an assistant editor. And then from then on, doors will open, So yeah, luckily I found, I did my days in 2 years, which is a little bit longer than most, but I, was happy that I kind of said no, because who would have known, who would have thought like if my trajectory would have been different if, so there's a lot of different like butterfly effects or snowballing that can happen. But yeah, that was just an interesting thing for me to learn, especially after, graduating from it. You're like, I just want a job, but then you're like, wait, I have to say no, because if I, so but let's talk about mentorship. So were there any mentors that come to mind as far as starting out or currently in your current job that you, I mean, I know you talked about Laura, Kakhi, but is there anyone that sort of helped kind of starting to shape who you are?
Well, yeah, I think, probably the most impactful person right now is, Salim Azim, my editor that I was with on Reasonable Doubt. I mean, by far, I've spent more time with him than anybody over the last, 8 months. And it's something where we were talking about getting lunch, right? Me and Salim, we got plenty of dinners together. I mean, we have gotten closer, and he's been able to show me this industry and what he knows. And to speak on mentorship, it's like you can have, one mentor, you can have 4, you can have 6. Mentorship is a two-way street, and you should be able to be the therapist for them, or teach them things that they don't know just because they have all this experience. It's a two-way street, more along the lines of like friendship. And so and then also I heard an editor say that if I can just get a message from an editor that I really look up to, that's a form of mentorship. Anybody that you can ask a question to and they're willing to share their advice with you, that's mentorship. And so I would say Salim, obviously. I would say the entire ACE community has been incredible with mentorship. Anybody that I bump into that is a part of ACE, they have something beneficial for me to say or for me to learn from them. And I kind of take the whole community as mentorship. So, that's kind of how I approach it.
I also want to add that mentors doesn't necessarily have to be only editors as well. I think for me, I've also grown to learn that I'm really close with producers that have sort of told me like, this is the path, that I would recommend. I know your strengths as a VFX editor, but if you really don't want to be a VFX editor, let's not, hire you on VFX editing shows. Let's just say like that's something I think also I didn't really think of when I also have been going through my career. It's like, oh yeah, producers obviously are I mean, they're going to be the ones hiring you as editors ultimately too. So it's good to also, have that kind of relationship or that dynamic with them as well. And how about you, Grant?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, bouncing off kind of what you're saying, I think like even just viewing mentorship as like a friendship, I think in many ways can be a very invaluable thing too. Like I think back to who honestly I would consider like my earliest mentor was a really close friend of mine from college, Michael Schusterman, who's now working assistant editor here in this industry. But he was a grade above me in film school. And when I first started going to the school, he was kind of the first person I met who was like also trying to be an editor, also still figuring things out. But like he was so willing to kind of just share his knowledge, share what he was learning with, with me and other people. And we also just connected through similar hobbies, similar interests, a similar love for the craft and for like the technical side of things. And what blossomed was a very true friendship outside of, editorial. But because we were also still kind of working together in our own careers and aspirations, we would very much support each other through all of that too. And I think of just like all of the advice he's given me and what I feel like I'm sharing with him too.
Right.
That's, I think, very much helped us throughout everything. But just that willingness to like be there for the person in whatever, hardship they're going through the successes you celebrate and share with them, through the, the failures you help lift them back up. Not just him, I have many people in my life who have been able to support me in that way. And the big thing too is like it encourages me to want to do that for other people as well. I think that's really the benefit of mentorship, is when people help support you, it gives you the capacity to give that on to the next person. And I think that's how we create a very healthy, environment, especially within this career, within this industry. And I think too, just so many of my mentors have gotten through ACE, specifically Lindsay Sotelo and Mara Corey. Those two were so invaluable to me in helping me with some just like really difficult decisions and helping me through really difficult just like moments and like awkward situations. But their willingness to just be an ear to where I could like reach out to was so moving that it gave me so much capacity to be wanting and willing to try to do that for other people too.
Awesome. Yeah, so we're nearing sort of the end, but the session's going to stay open for a little bit longer. I just, want to make sure I get everyone's, I promised the Q&A 15 minutes before the session technically ends. So I'll just run through some of the questions that we've been getting. Paul Lundquist says, when you're crafting a cold email to a PA on a show or feature, what would you say to them when you're trying to connect with them over the show? Would it be something along the lines of, I see you were on the show, I'd love to hear your experience as a PA? What sort of would you say to make that personable?
I think to show an understanding of kind of like what you have done and kind of like done your research, you know the person and you're inspired by them. I think just like kind of sharing that is very beneficial. And then make it personal too. I think just to kind of show gratitude where it's you recognize that like, what you're doing is an ask of their time. And so to be very appreciative of any time they would be willing to give you. But to kind of, I think just being very genuine and even just like kind of asking that question. Like for me, honestly, if I ever get an email or a message from somebody, it's so much easier for me to like, want to and help and kind of give that response back if it is kind of clear in like what it is they're asking for instead of just like a general like, can we talk like about what? I don't know. Like,
come on, I got so many things happening on my schedule. I need you to, exactly. Kind of meet everyone halfway and be very, confident and be like, this is what I want to learn. Ahir, unless you want to add something to that, Kakhi?
Oh, no, that was perfect.
Okay. Ahir says, I've heard that a good post PA or assistant editor can anticipate the needs of those above them. Can you share an example of a time we were able to do that?
Yeah, man, I think that anticipation is amazing. And I've heard, it's like some people say like, be the smartest in the room. No, you should be the most helpful in the room. And so, for me, it's the little things of like, getting footage and my editor cutting a scene and knowing, that we're going to need ADR in a place, and, things like ADR are generally left up to the assistant, unless it's, super specific from the producer. So I'll go ahead and I'll start recording those things and giving him a bin of stuff. So that way he doesn't really have to even, ask me, hey, I think I'm going to need ADR for this, or, hey, I'm going to, can you go record this? Oh, I've already recorded it. It's already ingested into the project. He's got that stuff. He can start working immediately. He doesn't have to pull away. So that's kind of an instance where I've kind of had that go on.
During the ACE internship, what do the daily tasks look like in your position? Are you actively editing or you're watching an editor work? So as an intern, when you're going and shadowing these rooms, what are you doing?
You are a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
You are there with a journal in your hands, a pen in one hand, and you're writing down every single thing you see, you hear, every question you ask, every answer to that is purely observational. There were a couple opportunities where like the team on the show were very, very sweet and willing to let me like touch some footage and practice themselves. I remember like getting to put together like a multicam sequence on The Voice. Like I got to do it as a side task because I was interested in just like seeing how they do it and learning how to do that. But really, like you're not post PA. Like you are there purely as just like a shadowing individual to just see how things work and to ask as many questions.
And then you write a journal about it after when you get home, late at night when you're tired and you don't want to do anything. Jordan Brown asks, how do you balance your career as an assistant post PA while also finding time to exercise your creative editing muscles on the side, such as editing short films for friends or doing editing practice on your own, etc.?
Yeah, I think that is something that you do have to find the balance. I think that some shows that you work on, you probably should not take a side gig because there's the scale of the show is so grand. And then there's other shows where, maybe your editor even encourages you to say, hey, this show's kind of light, what do you you're doing a great job here. Are you cutting anything on the side? And then, that kind of gives you the inclination that, maybe I might be able to take something on the side. But I think that's kind of a case by case basis. You have to feel out what's working in your life at that particular moment in your career.
I would say for me, I've learned that I don't want to do that. I do not want to edit when I have been looking at a screen editing for 40, 50 hours a day. I think what is helpful for me to get that creative itch and that creative scratch is to do other creative things outside of that. I recently started kind of getting into ceramics a little bit, and it was like practicing
Nice.
that, and like that was such an exciting experience to do something very tactile, very hands-on. Was
Mhm.
very rewarding. I very much am into just writing and like journaling as well, and so there are other avenues I think to kind of help with that creative itch, and I think in so many ways too, as editors and as storytellers, so much of your creative inspiration comes from, I think, just like life, and so much of just like doing things too. And so finding the time to, go and travel, or to
Yep.
go and, go for a hike on the weekend, or go meet people and do things in your life outside of editorial, when you then come back for your job and to be an editor, to be a creative, there's more that you can pull from. And I've learned a lot of things from doing other creative activities that I've then been influenced in how I then execute within my editing creativity, that I never would have expected to kind of get as a connection. So I think it's good to find a balance even outside of that
Yep.
too.
And I just want to piggyback off of that. I mean, he's completely right. Like doing something, I'm very much into figure drawing, and I figure drawing in Los Feliz when I can on the weekends, and it's so freeing and it recharges your battery so
Yep.
well.
Yes.
To come back on that Monday and do your job.
It separates, sort of breaks it up a little bit, especially when you're on a show that's a marathon. You're like, you kind of get hazed, or not hazed, but like a daze, and you're just like, what is happening?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's important. Johan says, in retrospect, what is one piece of advice you would give yourself before starting the internship? I'd say probably get ready to sort of get a lot of sleep. Kind of like prepare yourself for. I mean, it's boot camp. It's not like an easy. It's not an easy 3 or 4 weeks, however long it is. It's a lot of getting up and getting there early, following sort of all the rules that the ACE intern, they give you sort of the lecture series, right? And they give you a checklist of things that you have to kind of go through. I think a lot of it is really being engaged in the moment, and then also learning a lot, especially if you're new to everything. And I remember not getting a lot of sleep. I think that was like the biggest thing. I should have, because I worked on the journals for, I did it so late that I ended up losing a lot of sleep.
Yes.
But it is hard. I mean, it's a lot of going to shadow rooms, learning from editors, and talking to everyone, right? You're being introduced to all these post producers, supervisors, PAs, and you're kind of part of their team for a week. And then you kind of have to just relay all of the information back to your mentors in the program.
Yeah. I think that focus on allowing yourself the capacity to soak in everything, and to make that more of a priority over, I think, trying to step into the shoes of expectations. So I think there's a really big spotlight I remember feeling when I was going through the internship, and very much there's like certain responsibilities that you do get for being kind of, the intern of the year, and kind of being under the ACE umbrella, that can be a bit overwhelming, and can almost be, I found myself sometimes even just like overthinking things that I would say or things that I would do. But what I really found the most benefit for was the focus, like, okay, no, this is a period for me to educate myself and to learn and to grow. And so just to make that the priority, over just trying to like do something that I think is right, where it's like, no, I need to be here and take in what the opportunity is giving. That was what I found to be the most beneficial from it. And getting sleep.
Right.
Definitely getting sleep. Getting sleep allowed you to do that.
Right. No, I think that, I would definitely get your process down before day one, in a sense of, when you're going to wake up, how you're going to take notes when you're there, that way that when you get into the flow of things, whether it's the time you go to bed, whether it's when you get home that day to do your journals, and when you give yourself a little bit of you time, when are you going to do that? Like make a process for yourself so you can get through the gruelingness of all the journals and the visiting and all that stuff. And then that kind of primes you for the actual career, because like everything that we do is a process, from, the job day in and day out, to the days we take off, to what we're doing on those days when we're off, to the people we need to email back. I mean, it's just your professional career starts to just really become a process that kind of goes into your personal life. And that's okay. I like to be organized in that way.
Yeah. Rose says, what are the benefits of refusing a post-PA job before getting your days? I've heard of post-PA leaving shows to get their days. I mean, I can take this one because I did this. I didn't want to get a post-PA job before my union days because usually when you work on a show, it's probably 8 to 12 months long. I didn't want to delay that process, especially if I needed to work on something that, like, I needed to be a post-PA on a reality show and then become an assistant. So that time was very important to me to get my days. Usually, I mean, I personally wanted to get it within a year from graduating school. So, because I wanted to work in scripted already. So it just depends. It's a highly debated topic. I mean, the pros of going onto a post PA job before you get your days is you make these connections and then they leave to get their days. And then you have those connections when you have your days. So then they can hire you as an assistant. So you can technically do a little quick step. And I have a little dog because
I just want to add to the days thing. Yeah. Me getting my days, I kind of felt when I look back at it, I kind of had a really good plan, is that whatever city that you are in, try to find something before you get to LA that is in broadcast. A lot of reality television shows are broadcasted. Go there, go to your local, your local production companies that are doing reality television, and go get your days. Whether you start as a PA there and then work your way to an assistant editor, get your days there as long as it's broadcasted. And I think that that's a really good way to save yourself some heartache financially before you move to Los Angeles. When I moved to Los Angeles, that was a really, really big help for me. I was already on the roster in that regard. And so that's just one thing that I advise.
Yeah. And I love to kind of talk about this a little bit too, just on the flip side, because I very much did the opposite. I started as a post PA in scripted, and I was very fortunate to get the apprenticeship, which is basically, it's a direct position bump up that gets you into the union where you don't need your days. It's very rare and it doesn't happen very often. And I know there's sometimes kind of confusion into how it really works. And so for anybody who is trying to figure out what to prioritize, whether it's like to go take the post PA job in, scripted versus like leaving to get your days, it's tough to really advise one way or the other. There's more agency, I think, that you do have in being able to leave to go work on getting your days, working in reality at Trailer House, to give yourself a guarantee so that if you were to then come back to scripted, you can have that very linear path. I know people who have, PA'd on 2-3 productions with the intention and with communication that they were going to try to get the apprenticeship, and then they ended up getting it, and they worked for 2-3 years as a PA, and they had to go leave and then come back. The reason and the way that it worked for me was that I had worked with a team on a couple productions. They had communicated to me that they wanted to try and make that work. And the way you kind of go about doing that is it's 2 applications where your team needs to talk to the studio, and it's basically a question to the studio of, can we spend an extra, $50,000, $60,000 on an individual? And so it's a money question, which can be really difficult for the studio to say yes to. In my situation, the studio said yes because I'd been with Lucasfilm for 3 years as a PA. And so because they saw that, they were like, okay, we want to help this guy because he's been with us for a while. But again, that's very rare. On the flip side, it's an application to the union where you're saying, hey, we would like to promote this person on our team to an apprentice. And we just want to get this person, even though there's a roster. We don't want to take something from the roster because this individual has specific, unique understandings and knowledge of our workflow that we need him or her specifically to get that bump up. Once you get both those applications and they both say yes, that's how the apprenticeship works. It's just very difficult because you need a lot of people supporting you on that path, and you need a lot of luck for people saying yes along the process. And so, like Alfonso said earlier, I think like if you get the opportunity to take a post PA role, even whether there's a communication of the apprenticeship happening or not, it's still great to take for that opportunity for a network and for people. But the union is trying to push for that as an option going forward. It's still rare, but it does exist, and it's something to consider when meeting a team and taking a project and just within your own mental calculus of what path you're going to try to go after.
Yeah, that's well said. Absolutely. Yeah, that's always tricky, that apprentice editing role. That's very popular. I think a lot of people would love that position because it's a very good entry point in learning, and especially you're technically in the union, right? Because that's in a union position. Cool. Jeremy asks you, this is to Grant. You mentioned one of you worked as a finishing editor. Do you have any specific advice for someone trying to transition from finishing editor to assistant editor?
I mean, my finishing editing experience was very kind of random because it was very much, it was a project that had been worked on for about, I think, like 2 or 3 years at that point, and they just needed to get it off the finish line to get it to their indie theaters and get distribution. And so I kind of just came on to help gather material and to get it out. It was very much a one-off job in kind of my talks with other AEs and other people that I knew. And so it was, again, I think it's one of those things where, I mean, you meet people working on that job. I got to meet the editor and the AE and the director on that show, and I've been able to be in contact with them, and I've been offered other work from them because of that. But in terms of transition, I think it's a matter of, again, just kind of showing your skill sets in that way and being capable within the line of work where you can be trusted to get what needs to get done. And if you can be trusted in the work that you do and you communicate what you want to do, which might be a little bit different kind of work, there's more of that willingness to be like, okay, well, if you can figure out how to, get this into a theater screen, you could probably also figure out how to help an editor, prepare their bins. And so it is an element of, I think, just showing credibility in your action and in your work that helps with that trust to give the opportunity.
Do you do anything for the health of your eyes? If so, what do you do? Well, I normally like to go on walks. I think it's just to get out of the room and just not look at screens for a little bit. I used to do that on a show. My editor loved going on walks, like a literal 20-minute break around, the little office complex that we were in. It did really help because that show was pretty grueling. We stayed there, from 7:30 a.m. to like 10 p.m. usually. That was like a pilot. That was really rough. And she made sure, she was like, we need to go on at least 1 or 2 walks every day just to like not be surrounded by screens. So I guess if that, the health of your eyes, obviously, I think if a quick one, I think is you like look at something that's far and you like kind of defocus your eyes from the same distance.
Oh, interesting. I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, you like do it for like 20 seconds, I think. The editor was Lisa Bromwell, by the way. She was great. She's an amazing editor, ACE member. She would tell us always to like look further out, defocus your eyes from the screen. So
I know for me, a big thing is having there's other lights in the room. I very much am a big warm light fan because computer screens give off just a lot of natural blue light, which can be very intense. And if you're in a dark room and the only source of light is coming from the screen, that's where it can be really painful. But if you're able to, like in my bedroom, I have lamps that have a very warm glow to it, which helps kind of balance things out a little bit. If you're in an office, I know people who love having string lights and very much like kind of setting mood lighting, but just like even allowing there to be other sources of light outside of the screen itself can help take the pressure that just the screen gives you. And I also like blue light glasses. I think those things are always nice, even though I think they're scientifically proven to not do anything.
I have it. Mine are all of it. I got the blue. I got the transition ones where it changes into shades.
Oh, that's sick.
Yeah, I just went for it. My eye doctor was like, "You should go for it." I did. What should assistant editing what should assistant editing portfolios look like? I often find it hard to showcase my work beyond a written credit list or resume, but is that all one really needs? I don't think, well, this is me personally, I don't think anyone needs a portfolio like a reel or anything. No one asks me for a sizzle reel or some sort of showcase of my assistant editing work. I think that's very hard to show. I think just telling them that you worked on the show or your resume is, the go-to. There's no other, I don't think, at least from my experience, there's no other way.
I think you just have to have a really, I think I was told that your resume should be, as an assistant editor, be so clear and concise and really it should pop off the page, like your last 4 credits, and that the way you put together a resume really speaks a lot about you in our industry. And so I would say as an assistant editor, focus a lot on the aesthetic of your resume, and then obviously your credits. Your shows are your real, they're your people that you've worked with, and make sure that your references that you're the closest with on those shows are on that resume so that they can be called and so that they can vouch for you and champion you on to the next thing.
I think references would probably be one of the most important things is if you have an editor who'd be willing to vouch for you, to be able to kind of be like, hey, I can give you their number. Because I know a lot of times when I've been interviewed for assistant editor work, it's been the editor is kind of curious about like how I work with an editor. And so I would imagine from the editor's perspective, if they can talk to another editor, be okay, how did they support you? That can be really what they're looking for outside of just credits as a whole.
Yeah.
And so being able to be transparent in an ability to kind of have somebody you work with support you in that way and kind of give you a good word of mouth, I think would be potentially a really helpful.
I think in the interview too, I think go through like the experiences you've gone through, like share specifics. I think a lot of people, whenever they go to interview, it's always like, oh yeah, I did this. I was an assistant. I did this. And like meet them halfway, like tell them what was different about your production that can be useful for their production. Say like, yeah, I worked on the next lab. This was something that was done from photochem, and I did this exactly. Like I was the one that digitized, kind of like what your thing was too, is Grant, when you had to bring the mobile production cart all over set. Like that's a very unique thing to you that when you go into an interview for your next job, people are going to want to learn more about that. It's kind of like you're kind of expressing yourself too in the interview. So I think that's also where you showcase when it is in the interview, is like when you're actually sharing your experiences as sort of your portfolio, when you actually talk to them one-on-one or on the phone. That's, I think, where I think you should shine, is like be ready with a list of experiences to share, because I think that's where most people are going to want to know. That's what they want to kind of see if you can handle what they're asking for.
We're all storytellers at the end of the day. Tell a story.
Exactly. Exactly. Comment rather than a question. For anyone trying to make contacts or get experience, never be afraid to contact people. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn works. Reach out to people. We all like to see everyone succeed. That's true. I think as far as like our industry, I feel like editors and assistants, apprentice, post PAs, we're all like the nicest. I feel like mostly, like everyone. Yes, sometimes it's hard to get a response back, but when you do find one, they are 100%. Especially in our ACE community, everyone is willing to at least carve out 10, 15 minutes to share or chat or just to get to know someone. We all kind of have that, especially here in our ACE group. It's that feeling of like wanting to help others, and don't be afraid to like tap into the resources that ACE has, or if you want to go in and cold email, just obviously, everyone's busy and they are doing their jobs, but one out of the 99 people I emailed, that one person was Karsten. So boom, like everything opened, all of the doors opened after that. So that, let me just go through the chat. I know there's a lot of people that also put questions in the chat. I'm going to go to the top. Raul also says that the Blue Collar Post Collective hosts monthly in-person networking events, both in New York City and LA. Make sure you guys check that out. Blue Collar is a really awesome group. I think it's on Facebook. They'll have sort of events happening for a lot of the editing events that happen around LA and New York. Grant, are you working on Mando and Grogu? Yes, Kate asks. Let's see, what else? I think we had kind of hit all that. Alyssa says, always be cutting, ABC. That's a good quote to keep in mind.
Or even, I also similarly have an ABC, but mine's always be creating too. And so if you just
I like that.
Always be creating something, I think is
that's great.
Yeah.
That's an awesome quote too. Yeah. Whether that's anything, right? It doesn't matter if it's scripted related. It could be YouTube. It could be a short. It could be anything. Just continue flexing that muscle and kind of working it out. Late to the session. How does one get into the internship when you can't get letters of recommendation for applications? Well, I'm sure, you can, letters of recommendations can be from anyone. So I'm assuming you can still find letters of recommendations from, people who as far as just professionally when you work. It could be teachers that you've had. That's a good one.
When I applied, my 2 letters of rec came from my film school's editing thesis professor, and then also when I was a VFX PA at the time when I was applying for the internship, and so the VFX producer on my show, he was really kind and giving me a letter rec too. And so people who can just speak to your character and also who just truly know you and kind of know what your goals are too, and you can speak to that.
Yeah.
It could be really anybody.
Yeah.
My two came from, the reality house I was at, my head of post-production, and then also one of the producers that I'd worked for. And again, it just goes back to references. I mean, that's what they are.
Yeah.
You know, they're speaking to your character and what you can do. And you know, I just want to add one thing about just like how big the world is, or you know, or sorry, how small the world is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I got my first, you know, union job from my editor who 15 years ago, and again, I was doing this reality job in Texas, but my editor, my post supervisor for my reality job, gave my editor his first reality job like 15 years ago.
Wow.
Like that, like we were at the Ace Luau and he was asking me, you know, hey, how'd you get started? And I said, oh, I was in reality in Texas and, you know, trying to get my days. And he said, I have a post manager friend that works in Texas. And I said, oh, what's his name? And I said the name and he was like, oh, he gave me my first assistant editing job.
Wow. That's incredible.
And so I just want people to know that like the world is small and people are well traveled.
Mm-hmm.
So just do the best work that you can do, like right now. Yeah, that's what I got.
That's kind of cool. Yeah. Alina asks, what's the best way to shape an assistant editor resume if most of your experiences is as an editor on independent films rather than on big shows? How would you frame it so that if you've often been your own assistant on your own projects, occasionally collaborated with other editors? I'd just say just make an assistant editor resume and name you as the assistant editor on those independent films, and then make an editor resume. And if you're also an editor on those specific films, you would have the same credit. You wouldn't put two assistant editor. You wouldn't put assistant editor and editor on the same resume. I would just separate them and then call yourself an assistant on one of those. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just make two separate resumes and then just have the same title on them. Cool. Well, I think I've hit all the questions. Feel free to continue putting them. I'll probably start wrapping it up soon. Maybe I'll have one last question from my little thing here. Just really quickly before we wrap it up, while everyone's putting their last questions on, how does AI play a role in your jobs, or does it play a role in your jobs? Have you worked with anything AI related, or should we be worried or excited about it? Would love to hear your experiences on this topic.
I mean, for me, the most that AI has come into support for me is just avid troubleshooting.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. Yeah.
Sometimes the avid forums can be rabbit holes that do not support very well, and so just like using it as a tool to do deeper search to help you find the answers can be helpful. It hallucinates a lot because it doesn't really know what it's doing. So I try to tell, like, if I'm using like ChatGPT to help me ask questions, I'll tell it like what version of Avid I'm in, and I'll try to give it as much like information as I can. It works like 50% of the time, but sometimes that 50% that does work helps.
Points you in the right direction.
Yeah, it puts me in the right direction. And so just using it as a tool for kind of like helping with that has been really nice.
That's great.
Yeah.
Have
you
used anything AI related, Kakhi?
Not on this particular job I just came off, but I'm very much in touch with Flawless and what's going on over there. Really think it's really powerful. And so I'm curious to see what that's going to kind of unfold into.
What is Flawless? I'm not familiar with that.
So Flawless is basically a dialogue, like an ADR dialogue replacement where you can take, it's kind of like, you know, like Media Encoder where you have the panels and you drop your clips in. There's two different panels. And so let's say you have a performance and they flub a line, but you also have, you know, another take where they don't flub the line, but you like the body language performance of the one where they do. You drop the take that has the flub performance in one panel, and then you drop the take of the one that has the clean one, and then it merges them together. And then they keep the performance naturally, and then they kind of like, they perform the words correctly. It's crazy.
You're morphing the mouth. Yeah, you're morphing the mouth.
I'm looking this up.
No, yeah, you're morphing the mouth of the actor. So we actually use it pretty often at work. And you're basically just, you're inserting lines into an actor's performance. You can't make the actor act, but you can change the line that they say, and they're going to lip read whatever line you feed them to. Take a look at it.
Crazy. Yeah, I will be. That's very
accidentally booted for.
You got so excited that you stopped sharing.
Flawless is a very powerful tool that I'm curious to see where it goes.
Yeah, we use it at work too.
Nice.
And then I use well, we also use 11 Labs, which is the AI generating voice tool. So like you can basically sample my voice or whoever's voice, and then it'll create like a preset of my voice, and then I can type in whatever I want to say, and it'll say it back to me. And now they have a better version of it, and you can like write in an emotion. You can change the way that it says it. You can even do a speech to text. So if I like wanted to say something a specific way, like if I wanted to have a pause or whatever, I can say it into my phone, and then I can plug it into the app, and then it'll deliver the line the same, tonality, rhythm, and it's pretty powerful. So I would check 11 Labs as far as just like, temp ADR or scratch ADR. Bill Keith is reinforcing it in the chat. So it is a great tool to check out. And then Flawless obviously is another one that's up and coming, and it's super powerful of what we've seen so far. So, nice. But let me check one last thing. What resources have really helped you gaining confidence before taking that first job? What are some of the resources that you've used, or any books, anything online, any mentors that you've reached out to, maybe something from ACE?
I think for me, was a piece of advice that I was given that really resonated with me was how, whether you're a post PA or you're an assistant or whatever, I think so much of the attitude that you bring with you is what is going to allow you to succeed or fail, especially when you go into an environment where you might not know how certain things are done or how to do certain things. It's so long as you have the willingness to figure it out and you're thorough with that, you can really accomplish so much. And a big thing too, like for like PAing in general, I know a lot of people who I've talked to are sometimes worried about like, how do I show off like my credibility and like how I know what to do, how to make a good resume for a PA. And like from my experience, from people that I've talked to and people who I know who hire PAs, they look so rarely at experience and more so at attitude. And it's like, is this somebody that I can trust? Because a PA, you're not expected to really know anything. It's very much like, a training role too. And so to just like be willing and confident in recognizing what you don't know, but knowing that you don't know certain things, but you want to figure it out and you push yourself to go and figure out those things, that is what will allow you to succeed anywhere.
100%. I mean, attitude is huge. I think one of the best PAs I've ever had was like, his attitude was like he did not care that anything was like, that anything went wrong. Like he would just be so incredibly helpful, and he would be like, don't worry, we got it. He would actually be kind of, you're saying, be like my therapist and being like, yeah, no, it's fine. You're fine. Even if it's late at night, I'll be here. I'm hanging out, just chilling. And then like kind of ease the stress or the pressure. Like even just like watching down cuts, because when you have to deliver a cut to a director, you QC it. And he had this great idea that for some reason I never thought of, was to watch 20 minutes and then I'll watch the second 20 minutes, so that we don't have to watch the entire cut after I export it out at like 9 p.m. So we both get out there earlier, like instead of him just hanging out, not to say that he's not doing anything productive, but he's technically just hanging out because I'm there. Yeah. So he offered to watch the first 20 minutes to see if there's anything wrong QC wise, and I would watch 20 minutes to finish the episode. And we literally simultaneously, finished the entire cut within 20 minutes because we both watched it. So it's stuff like that, I think attitude is huge.
I mean, and not only is it huge, man, it's contagious, good or bad.
Yeah. Yep. That's very true. Absolutely.
I've been told many times on every show that I've worked on that like one of the things that they've appreciated from me so much wasn't necessarily like being good at my job or being there on time. It was always just being positive. Like that has always been the number one thing that people have reminded me that they appreciate. Especially when you work with people who have been in this industry for a long time, who've gone through periods of burnout, who've been jaded. I think just like what you can take advantage of being young and being early in career and having that kind of like gusto and that excitement is to bring that with you to the place that you go to. And it reminds a lot of people who are there why they want to be there in the first place. And it can help boost the spirit really, really well, which has a lot of effects that butterfly on from that.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Grant, Kakhi. I just want to make sure everyone got their questions answered. Yeah, it looks like I got the last one. Thank you again for spending so much time with us. Hope everyone had a great EditFest. This is all going to be on the archives, so you can feel free to rewatch it in case you missed anything. But I appreciate everyone watching and staying till 2:20. We extended it for a little bit there. So thanks again, Grant, Kakhi. Appreciate all of your experiences, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you, guys.
See ya.
Yeah.
I'm still here.